Welcome back to Cooking with Kayla D. I'm Kayla, and this is my husband Randy. My disclaimer. If you haven't done so, please subscribe and remember to hit that notification bell so you get all the up-to-date episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment so we can get to know you and hear your feedback on our videos, and also share. Sharing is caring. We're going to be making Mexican beef stew or soup, whichever you prefer to call it. For your ingredients, you're going to need 1.5 to 2 pounds of roast beef cubed, 4 to 6 red potatoes or any potato of your choice cubed, 3 to 4 ears of corn split into 3 to 4 pieces each, 1.5 cups of baby carrots cut in half, 2 to 3 zucchini cut into 1-inch pieces and then also into halves, 1 medium to a large onion diced of your choice, an Anaheim pepper, or if you don't have that, a bell pepper, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, 3 tablespoons of chicken bouillon, 1 tablespoon of tomato bouillon or 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, 1/8 cup of chopped cilantro, and 1/8 cup of a special chili blend, which we'll talk about soon too. Optional, you can put rice in this recipe, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. Here is the special chili recipe, and if you click right here, you can go to the recipe for this that was loaded this past Wednesday, or I'll have the link again in the description and at the end of this video. So I went ahead and prepped my ingredients. There's my garlic, I have my cilantro, my roast beef. I went ahead and got my bouillons, both the chicken and the tomato. And then I also have my carrots. I chose to use a green bell pepper. We don't have Anaheim peppers here, so that's what I used. Also an onion. That is my special spice blend, which we'll talk about later. The corn, the potatoes, and the zucchini, 1 inch thick, cut in half. So let me tell you about the peppers now. So the recipe calls for Anaheim peppers, and most Mexican dishes do when you're making a soup or a broth. However, I do not have them, and so I'm going to show you 2 other options if you do not have these Anaheim bell peppers near you. I went ahead and took this photo from Walmart. Most locations do have them. I am in South Carolina and our location does not. So I'll go ahead and show you other types of peppers you can use to replace these Anaheim peppers in the recipe. So your first option would be poblano peppers. Our location does have these poblano peppers, and so you can replace it with that. The flavor will be different. I love poblano peppers, but in this recipe, I actually prefer to use a bell pepper than a poblano pepper. And here's what poblano looks like, in case you need to know that. I like the bell pepper because it is closer to an Anaheim pepper. The Anaheim pepper actually tastes similar to a green bell pepper. So that's why I went ahead and opted to use the green bell pepper myself instead of poblano. But you can use poblano if you're not a fan of bell pepper and you don't have Anaheim. Use the poblano peppers. Here's the green bell pepper, and that's what we used. And as I always say, use what is ever comfortable for you and your family or whoever you're cooking for. We are opting to use rice for this recipe, so I'm just going to follow the directions on my rice instructions and do it my Instapot way. I'll put the amount of water to the rice for however many you're eating, and I doubled my recipe because we're going to freeze some of the rice. We freeze it so then we can just thaw it out and use it later. So I went ahead and got my rice in there, and I got my water in there. If you add salt, oil, whatever, go ahead and add that in there. I put my lid on, and I went ahead and sealed that, and then just got it set on the rice setting. Make sure your valve is closed. And I just pressed rice and then let it cook. And then once it was done, I let it slow release for 21 minutes until that little silver lever was completely down. Then I went ahead and opened up my seal valve and took my lid off. And after I take the lid off, then I got a fork out, and I always do this with the rice just to see how it cooked. I take my fork and I scrape it around and just fluff it up before removing it. Now, because I am making the Mexican soup in my Instapot as well, I'm going to go ahead now and remove the rice and put it into another container. This is the rice I used. We use the basmati rice from India. We get it from Aldi. And now that I have my rice removed and I clean my Instapot, I'm ready to go on and cook my soup. So first, I'm going to put the saute button on. Once I have that on, and I'm going to go ahead and add some olive oil. You can use whatever oil you want to that because we're going to be sauteing some vegetables and warming our stock up before we actually pressure cook this. So as it comes up to temperature, you'll want to go ahead and add in your onion and make sure to get it all, don't waste it, and start sauteing that. After your onion, add in the peppers you chose to use. Ours was the bell pepper once again. If you're using Anaheim or the poblano, go ahead and add that in. You'll want to chop it the same way. Take the seeds and the stem off. And then you're going to let that saute for about 2 minutes until those onions start to get a little translucent. At this time, if you're using tomato paste, you'll want to make a little well in the center and go ahead and add in your tomato paste. If you're going with the bouillon, then you can wait. If you can also do a small can of chopped tomatoes if you would like and pour that in right now. So now that we have our maybe tomato in there and everything, and our onions and our bell pepper sauteing, we're going to go ahead and add in our garlic. And you want to wait until now to add that in. You don't want to burn your garlic. You want it to just be a little fragrant and actually make your recipe taste good and not bitter. So don't burn your garlic. Wait to add it in until now, because you want to do that right before you start adding your seasonings and your broth in. So now that we have our garlic in there, now we're going to move on and add our water in. If you don't want to use bouillon and you would like to use chicken broth instead, go ahead and just the amount of water you would be putting in, put chicken broth in, and then you can skip the whole chicken bouillon part of this segment. So I'm going to ahead and put my water in, and I'm going to stir that around and make sure that everything's incorporating into the water well. Once I have that stirred, then I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next step by putting my tomato bouillon and my chicken bouillon into here. Now, if you used chicken broth, you're going to skip this step. If you're still going with the tomato bouillon, you'll put that in right now. It just depends on how you're choosing to make your recipe. It is completely up to you. We do the bouillon because Randy does not like chopped tomatoes, but the authentic recipe does require the chopped tomatoes. I'm just sharing the recipe we use with you. Do it however you want. You want to make sure you do stir this pretty well. You want to dissolve the bouillon because you don't want to get a burn notice on your Instapot once you start cooking. Next, I'm going to be putting in my special chili blend in. I will have a link at the end of the video to where you can get that recipe, as well as a link in the description box, so that way you can just go there and get the recipe for that afterwards. You want to make sure you stir that well so it's incorporated as well. You don't want to burn notice, and you definitely do need this special chili blend to have the soup become a Mexican soup. Otherwise, you're just making an American soup, which is fine if that's what you want. So next I'm going to go ahead and add in my cubed beef. I did larger cubes because when you're using the pressure cooker, they will cook down. And so we cut ours into a little bit bigger of pieces, as you can see here. But that way that they're bite sized when we go to eat them. They shrink almost to 50% smaller. So, and I don't remember what type of roast I use. You use any type of roast you want. If you don't want beef, you can use pork. It's up to you. You could put chicken. This soup is so versatile. I chose the chicken broth over beef broth because we want to taste the flavor of the beef from the beef, the natural flavor. So that's why we chose to use chicken broth over beef broth. When we use beef broth, it just doesn't taste as good. So once you have that in there, you're going to go ahead and put your Instapot lid on, close your valve, make sure it's on seal, and then go ahead and pressure cook this for 40 minutes. Once it's done, you release your, and the little thing is dropped, you release your seal, and you'll see that it's still boiling, which is great. I, at that time, hit cancel. I go ahead and hit my saute button again, and then I'm going to go ahead and start stirring this around, checking on it, make sure nothing's sticking to the bottom, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the additional ingredients to it, the rest of our vegetables, and I'll just go ahead and boil it with the lid off at this point because it doesn't take long to cook. So the first thing we're going to go ahead and add in there is our potatoes and our corn. You want to drop your corn in gently so it doesn't splash you. So I do that with my hands one at a time. Once I have all my corn in there, then I'll go ahead and pour in my potatoes very gently and then stir that around. And then you're going to want to go ahead and add in your carrots at this point, and be careful putting those in so you're not getting splashed. So I went ahead and added in my half carrots, and then I'm going to stir that around as well, and then leave it alone and let it get to boiling. You'll want to cook it, like I said, for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, it should look like this. Then you'll want to go ahead and stir it around. At this point, because I still have to add my zucchini in, I'm going to go ahead and have to remove some broth because, as you can see, I have a lot of broth. And at the time, I didn't realize it till after I started adding the zucchini in. So I went ahead and added my zucchini in, but as a note, a side note, for your own benefit, I recommend removing some of the broth before putting the additional vegetables inside of it so it doesn't overflow, just as a safety caution. So after I got my zucchini in there and I tried to stir it, then it like clicked on me, ding ding, Kayla, your pot's kind of full, so you're gonna need to remove some broth. So then at that point, I went ahead and removed some of my broth. I just got one of my little dishes that I had the veggies in, and I started using my ladle and putting some of that broth aside. I did go ahead and save the broth, so after I served my first bowl of soup, I went ahead and poured that broth that I had to the side back into the pot. I did not want to waste it. You don't want to. After you taste this, trust me, you're not going to want to waste any of that broth. You're going to want to savor all of it. Now, away from the rabbit hole and back to the recipe. When you're safely at a level where your broth is and your zucchini is in the pot, you want to go ahead and continue this on your saute, boiling for about 5 to 7 minutes, just until that zucchini starts to soften. You don't want it cooked all the way through because while you're serving, it's going to cook through. It will finish cooking through. So this is what it should look like. I went ahead right before I turned my cooker off. I added in my cilantro, and once I had the cilantro added in, I stirred it around as well as I could. My pot is so full. I'm telling you, you're going to love this soup. It is amazing. And I think you'll like it better with the rice. Now, if you're a low carb person, you're not going to want the corn, and you're probably not going to want the rice in there, and that is fine. You can replace it with cauliflower rice too if you would like. It's going to taste just as good. But if you are not low carb and you just love to eat your carbs, definitely enjoy the corn. It is a nice little sweetness as you're eating your soup. At this point, you can turn your pot off. It's ready. So this is where I incorporate my rice. I don't like the rice sucking up the broth, so we keep it separate. I just keep it at room temperature. I don't reheat it. The soup is warm enough to heat it. I go ahead and just add about a half a cup of rice into a bowl at the bottom of the bowl, and then I'm going to go ahead and pour the soup in over the top of the rice. You can use any rice you want. You can also use brown rice. I know that is gluten-free and low carb. Our store didn't have it. That is what we normally use. So we got rice instead is what they delivered, the white. So go ahead. I put the corn first around the edges. However many pieces of corn whoever's eating that bowl wants, I'll put around the edges and get that out of the way. Then I'll go to the bottom and I start pulling up the vegetables and the meat, and I pile in the desired amount of that serving for that person that is going to be eating that bowl. And then I go ahead and add in more of the broth to the level of broth for the person that is eating the broth. And that is how we serve our soup. So if you think you'll like this recipe, I say make it. Look at it. It absolutely looks delicious. You can change the vegetables up, put whatever vegetables you like in it, and just cook it the amount of time to where you like your vegetables as well. We enjoyed this soup as it was. I have tried so many different Mexican soup recipes, and so this is the one that we came up with that is most pleasing for me and my husband. And we just hope that you like it too and you try it. And then also play with it. If you like it, play with it. Change some things up. Get it to where it is best for you and what your family likes. For us, this is the way we like it. And it's just really good and hearty. And especially during the winter time, we had a storm, so that's why we went ahead and made it. And we're just happy to share it with you. I love the fact that YouTube makes it possible to learn from others and then also to help others come up with recipe ideas. So we thank you for joining us here again on Cooking with Kayla D. As always, here are some photos of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, the sunrise. We hope that you come back again, and if you haven't done so, please like, subscribe, and share. And also leave a comment. That way we can hear from you and get to know you. If you have any suggestions, we would love to hear them. Any ideas, we would love to hear those as well. As always, from here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, we say until next time, stay in the kitchen, keep on cooking, and God bless you.
Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua 1:9.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't, here on the left, and then to the right is that link to the special chili blend recipe. We'll see you again next time here on Cooking with Kayla D.